All right. I appreciate you letting me use your check picture as clickbait. I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to get people's interest of $100,000 check. Typically, when you see it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, uh,
$100,000
it
check.
it isn't. It's not normally I lost money. It's normally I've been wholesaling for 3 weeks and look at this new deal I just got. For those of you guys that are joining us live, we're going to start literally right here on the minute. I'm joined by Mike DeHaan, pronounced correctly, yes? Okay.
Yep.
Out of Spokane, which he was kind enough to explain is not Spokane before we went live. Always appreciate you helping me not look stupid publicly. If you guys have any questions at all during this stream, feel free to just throw them in chat and we'll get to those. This isn't really going to be anything like super preachy. Mike and I's thought process with this is just to kind of go through and decompress bad deals that we've both done, that we've lost money on, and kind of a what went wrong, potentially what went right, and then lastly, in an ideal world, there should have been some learning lessons anytime you pay somebody to take a property from you. Somebody says can't stay for the whole thing. Hopefully it's recorded. Yes. And you'll be able to find it wherever you're watching it right now when we're done. So I figured because I asked you to come on and share your shame, it was only fair that I shared one of mine. And I'll start with the first flip that I ever did, because like hindsight is always 2020. You can always look back on a deal and be like, I should have never touched this thing to begin with, or I should have done things differently. So this was my first flip, and I had a business partner at the time, and we'd been doing some wholesaling, and we kind of like, it almost feels like there's a hierarchy in real estate investing, like bird dog to like wholesaler to like flipper to like buy and hold to like developer, right? It's almost like Boy Scout merit badges. So we'd earned our wholesaling badge, and it was like we're gonna become flippers. That was our thing. Like we're gonna flip a house. It's gonna be so cool. It's gonna go so well. So this was back in St. Louis, Missouri. And I forget how we got the property. It would have been a yellow letter campaign, just absentee owners with equity. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And the first red flag with the property was lived in St. Louis for a long time. It was in a part of town that I knew nothing about, right? Like it was kind of hoodie, but like not too bad. But it wasn't an area that I was familiar with, but it was like, oh, looks like the numbers work out. Second red flag was the fact that it was a 700 square foot house. I kind of use the example of almost like swimming pools, and 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house, 2-3 baths. There's a lot of people that are interested in that. Attached 2-car garage. You start to take off like the garage, some of the bedrooms, or some of the bathrooms, and very quickly that gets less interesting to people. So you have a significantly smaller pool. So it was a 700 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in a not so great part of town. And the kicker I found out after I bought it, I don't know how I didn't get this beforehand. Like looking at the house, it doesn't have its own driveway. But I was like, oh, the neighbors don't have a driveway. Surely I'm the one with the driveway. So it was a shared driveway in a part of town where that just wasn't common. It was really odd for people. You couldn't park on it because it was theirs and yours. So I remember we did like a concrete square in the back, and we're like, oh, off-street parking for like maybe a Mini Cooper if you could like cut the turn behind the house. So from the beginning, was probably a deal that I should have just not touched. The next mistake we made, I wanted to flip a house pretty badly. So the money I took and I say take because I did make the choice. Hindsight's 2020. I think the rate was ridiculous, but this wasn't your normal hard money of like, 10% interest in 2 points. It was interest only. So I was like, oh, wow, no points. It's 15% for 6 months.
And was that through like a lender, or was that somebody that you knew?
Random person I met off Bigger Pockets.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah. So the APR for anybody who can add 15 plus 15 was 30% APR. I could have gotten probably better rates at, if I'd taken my car title somewhere, right? So the money was super expensive. One of the other big lessons that we learned was never to hire a new contractor. So the gal that worked on this flip for us had been like a sub for somebody else we knew, and went out to like do her own thing and was like, I'm going to manage, this project for you. It's going to go great. I'm going to put like blood, sweat, and tears into it. It's going to look like HGTV. What that looked like was over budget, behind schedule, and not done great. So all in all, on the deal, we listed it on the MLS. Next lesson I've got for anybody keeping score here is you do want to flip what sells, which is kind of what we touched on. People just weren't really buying 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses with a shared driveway in a bad part of town with like a semi-questionable foundation with street parking. Just there wasn't many people that this was appealing to. It was a couple months and we didn't have any offers. So you always want to make sure that you have multiple exit strategies. With my 30% money, I didn't. It was like, oh, this thing's going to fly. It was a good looking house. Actually, still looking back at pictures of it, it ended up being a pretty nice looking house.
So was this not one that you could have kind of like refinanced out of and rented? Was like
so hindsight's 2020, and I could have potentially, but I was not set up to try to do a buy and hold deal. And when you're paying 30% APR, every month feels like you're just getting like stabbed one more time. Any Lord of the Rings fans, like you ever notice it takes like 3 arrows to kill almost anybody? Every month felt like another arrow of like, this isn't going to go very well. So,
sorry, what was the initial purchase price? I'm trying to get a grasp for like what your holding was on this.
So I don't recall the exact numbers. I want to say we were all in for like 75 or 80 grand.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it wasn't super high end, but if anybody who knows my story, this was back like when I started, I was broke. Like my W-2 income, I think at this point was 23K a year. Right. So, what does that break out to on 85 grand? Anyway, it was hurting. Utilities, taxes, insurance, plus our lender was kind of like, yo, you guys said this was going to be 4 months. Like, what's going on here? So didn't own any rentals then. So I actually went through and I started calling like the We Buy Ugly Houses people and was like, somebody please, like, just give me a number, right? So on that flip, in order to make our private lender whole, we ended up getting a cash buyer, came through the MLS. So after realtor commissions and everything, we had to pay $7,500 to our private lender to make him whole. Now, some of the comments, 30%, is that even legal? Sounds like legal loan sharking. Hindsight's 2020, but the way I look at it, I didn't have to take his money, right? Like, I chose to. So I will say the one thing that I got out of that deal, other than just kind of the lessons I've already highlighted, was just I kind of established from day one that I will always make my private lenders whole, even if it comes personally out of my pocket. And I won't dive into another one too deep. Mike and I were talking about it before we went live here, but it's one thing to say that when it's $7,500 and you've got a business partner, so it's you need to do a wholesale deal to pay for it, or it's $3,500 a piece or whatever. But I was tested in that commitment to I'll always make a private lender whole a few years down the road on another deal. I botched the insurance. Totally my fault. Per the JV agreement, it was my responsibility. At the 11th hour, the lender decided they wanted to close with the property in their name. So we'd initially insured it under my name and never added them as additionally insured. And now they were technically the owner on title and I was not. So the property was part of like an arson spree that happened in a rougher part of Indianapolis. Somebody torched my houses and 6 others all in the same night. Just like literally went down the road like Molotov cocktailing vacants. And total loss was $45,000. Insurance said, well, we'll pay 10. And if anybody has kind of like a, my stupid mouth got me in trouble thing like I do, without even thinking, I was like, oh, I'll make you whole. Oh, where's that going to come from, right? So fortunately, I had a flip closing at about the same time. And we took all of the profits from that deal and made that lender whole. Both of those sucked, but I think that's one of the reasons that people are pretty comfortable investing with us now of like, what happens if a deal goes sideways? Well, I'm always going to take care of you. So Mike, let's get into yours. But before we do that, for any of you guys that are watching this that want to connect with Mike more, his username on Instagram is at MDD_investor. Mike is in a not cheap market, kind of in the Pacific Northwest, and is doing deals direct to seller. So if you're looking to surround yourself with other people that are like, Mike doesn't have a Rolls Royce and isn't a douche. If you're looking to surround yourself with people that are doing, real deals, highly recommend you go and give him a follow. So, Mike, $104,000 check. Why don't you tell us the story on this one?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for plug on the Instagram too. That's just my like investor Instagram that I've been doing, so I don't annoy all of my friends who
all of your non-investor friends.
Really don't care about my new kitchen flooring or whatever. But yeah, I got a $104,000 check on a property that we sold. I got the check purely so I could take a photo with it, because we see everyone sees those photos on social media, right? Of somebody stacking checks, holding those big checks, but you never know the truth behind it. And even looking at mine, like you put on the cover for this, it's like, oh wow, it's a lot of money. It's like, but
well,
in reality,
it's funny, the click-through rate on that post, people are like, oh my gosh, how did he do it? And they're like, oh snap, he lost money. I do want to highlight though, just because I think there is something fun to this. And if you can't admit that it's fun, then you're not honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted the check, so you had a picture with a 6-figure check.
Yeah,
like that.
Like they even had the option when I closed to do ACH, and I was like, and I asked them, "Can I get a check instead?" And they looked at me like, "I guess."
They're like, "Why?" Like, there's gonna be a hold on this. You're aware of that, right?
I feel it feels super questionable saying that, but not every day you get to do that for the average person, right?
Nah, dude. Early on, back when I used to get checks, we now do wires primarily, but I remember it was fun. I banked at this small local bank in St. Louis, and to be able to walk in like, yeah, I got another one, right? Of just like, who is this child that is just bringing these like $10,000 checks from random title companies? Like, it seems like super sketchy. I remember my dad asked me at one point, and he was like, "This is legal, right?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, all above board." But continue.
That's funny. Yeah, so I guess this deal, it was kind of a similar situation to you where I wanted to flip a house. So we bought this one, I guess for context, now we own 19 doors overall. When we bought this one, it was last spring. Thanks. We bought this one last spring, and at the time we owned 4, right? So this was kind of the first.
Wait, real quick. Is that 15 new units in a year?
That is.
It's awesome. Yeah. All right, continue. I'm wanting to make sure people are grasping how quickly you've grown and that you're doing it. Because I'll do the same thing. Like, yeah, we picked up 70 doors. Like, wait. That's pretty cool. Like, let's take a second and appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so at the time that we had 4, and they were all sort of turnkey properties that we bought off the MLS. Turnkey meaning they needed some work, but they weren't, anything extensive. So anyway, I found this one actually because somebody reached out to me on Bigger Pockets with this opportunity and actually wanted to partner with me on it. And it was a local gal who had seen me being active on Bigger Pockets and was just like, oh, this guy kind of seems like he knows what he's doing. And so basically was like, let's, we're both kind of new. Let's like learn this together. Right. Mm-hmm. And, ended very well with her. She was super nice, but it was a wholesale deal in one of the most ideal neighborhoods in Spokane on a super great location, like, close to this big park around a lot of, big expensive houses. And we bought it for $278,000, I believe. And everyone that what we anticipated was the ARV was about 400. And then as we were going down, we were being told like, oh, it's like mid 4s all day, so we had a lot of room. And then
what did the wholesaler make on it? Do you know?
$36,000. Yeah.
Wait.
And so I lost 27 for context.
So you lost 27. They made 36.
Yeah.
Now, first off, I don't fault them at all. Great job. I would be a total hypocrite if I pretended like I haven't pulled some decent assignment fees in my day. But we'll get to how you're not doing that anymore. But I love that you knew that number. I also love, I'm assuming you knew that before you closed, right?
Yes. And I didn't really think anything of it because having done so few deals, the closing disclosure was kind of like a foreign thing to me, so they gave me the rundown and I was like, oh, there's some numbers on here. I see you have to pay this. And I even asked, because it was the thing that was actually irritating too, was it was daisy chained through 3 different wholesalers.
Oh.
And so it was just like one that obviously nobody could get rid of. And I was the sucker that bought it, I guess.
Dude, they were like, there was like cheers all across the state of Washington from all the new wholesalers when the deal that had been assigned and re-signed finally went. So, all right. So bought it from a conglomerate of wholesalers for $36,000 fee. What was your purchase?
$278.
Okay.
Yeah, and the wholesaler said it was again, this is what they said, $415 ARV, and the rehab was supposed to be basically roof exterior work. And then, looking on the inside, it was definitely livable, right? It seemed good. And the thing that made this property interesting as well is that it was being used as a duplex with there was basically a 4-bedroom house, 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in the front with a 1-bed, 1-bath ADU in the back. Okay.
So for anybody who doesn't know, it's a good way of describing that. So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, or attached dwelling unit, depending on who you talk to or where you read. But it's basically like a duplex where one of them is like kind of big and the other is kind of like a small apartment or mother-in-law, kind of an efficiency typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that would like made it even more of like a winner in our minds, right? Because we were like, oh, we could rent this out and we could cash flow super well. That was like our alternative exit strategy. We couldn't flip it. So anyway, we moving forward with it. We go and we get the inspection. The inspector's finding all sorts of stuff. And even though on the outside of the house looked okay, it needed a new roof. We knew that. It needed some exterior fixes. We knew that. Then you walk inside and it's like, this is pretty good. But the previous owner had done a ton of DIY that was like criminally illegal. Like all the electric, tons of plumbing, basically everything that was behind the walls was illegal. And me being, relatively ignorant, I was talking to people. I was like, what do you think it would cost to like get that fixed? And they're like, oh, it won't be that bad. It'll be fine. I was like, oh, okay. If you say so. I think we have enough room here between 278 and 415. Like, yeah, exactly. And then a realtor we talked to was like, oh, 450. We're like, oh yeah, we got tons of room, so we'll figure it out.
So I would highlight for anybody who's taking notes on how to learn from our loss of money to not have to lose their own, would be anytime you see DIY work, especially if it's shoddy, that's a really, really bad sign. I've got a house that we're still dealing with issues on right now. That was 2 separate houses on one parcel. It's kind of an interesting setup. But they built a false wall to hide structural damage. Like literally, like, we're just going to pretend this isn't here. And, again, hindsight's 2020, but you had your inspection done prior to purchase or after?
Yep, prior to purchase.
Okay, good for you. A lot of people, more times than I would care to admit, I've walked a GC through and they've been like, oh yeah, this isn't that bad. And then you find out, there's a lot of stuff they missed.
Yeah, so it had tenants, so we were able to do that. I know with owner occupied, that tends to be a little more difficult, at least from our experience.
Okay.
But so we did that. And then, it was moving along. And then the first red flag came when our original hard money lender called me like 3 or 4 days before we're supposed to close and said, bro, the ARV on this is like 335. Like, there's no way you're going to be able to make money on this. And this was a national private lender. So, I started talking to people about it, and I basically just had to find, oh, they're wrong. They don't know this market. I know it way better than they do, right? So, I was kind of scrambling a little bit. And then the wholesaler comes, he calls me on the phone while I'm at work. This is when I was my primary job was I was working at a gym as like a coach. And I'm like coaching a class like in a CrossFit gym. And I get a call from I recognize the number as a wholesaler, and he's like, is deal going to close? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out lending. He goes, oh, I got a guy. I'll send him over to you. And, so this is now a lender that is associated with the wholesaler who calls me up and he's like, oh yeah, we'll get this thing closed in 48 hours. Okay. And, it was worse terms. And I looked on the closing disclosure. It was closing disclosure in hindsight. He was a broker. He made 12 grand on the brokerage for the lending.
So like a hard money broker kind of a thing?
Yes, exactly. So he had the connection and his fee was like 11,800 or something.
What is that, like 3.5 points?
Yeah, like a lot. Yeah, 4 points I think it was.
Wow.
And that wasn't including the points that we had on the loan itself. But I, same situation. I wanted to flip a house, right? So I was going to get it done. So we closed in 48 hours, and I guess to better justify too, this mortgage broker had his realtor buddy go and assess it and basically make a CMA that said, 470, so basically just to make us even more confident. So now everyone's made fat money on this except for us.
So it looked, from your point of view though, you've got realtors telling you it's worth 60 grand more than you thought it was worth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. Yeah, there's, we're going to spend more on the money here, but there's more upside.
Exactly.
So you were doing what I think myself and a lot of people have found themselves doing, particularly if like you're not going direct to seller and you're going off the MLS or wholesalers or whatever. We'll kind of start to sell ourselves on a deal of like, oh, it's not ideal, but it's fine.
Exactly. And the thing with this one too is because of the location, like every single person that I talked to that wasn't involved in the deal necessarily, but just like kind of is into real estate, they were like, wow, how'd you land a property up there? That's an amazing spot. So like I start to get this confidence that, it's just going to be a slam dunk all day. But yeah, anyway, so we close on it and we start with the rehab. I go in, meet the tenants. The tenants are a single mother, a daughter, maybe early 20s, and then a younger son and the daughter's boyfriend. And the daughter is, I want to say 8 months pregnant. Okay. So anyway, we get in the situation and, they know we're trying to flip the house. They lived in this house for 4 or 5 years.
Is this like tail end of like 2019?
This is in April when we closed. April of 2019. But yeah, I sort of met the situation with the tenants, and I was like, I don't want to displace this family. It's been here for 5 years, and has an 8-month pregnant daughter, right? So I was way too nice to them, and they were month to month, and I just let them essentially stay while we do the exterior rehab, because what we had decided, since the inside was livable, that we were just going to do an exterior rehab and kind of wholesale it, I guess, and list it for $400, which we saw as a lower price, and try to do it pretty quickly. Okay. So
what was your exterior remodel cost?
So we had a roof, which was $14K. We had a full paint job, which was I think $3, and we had like some odds and ends. I think it was like another like 6 or 7. So maybe 23, 24.
So you were all in for low 300s at that point?
Yeah, low 300s. And then, all the fees that we paid as well, which took a big chunk out. So maybe like 320.
Okay.
Yeah, but so we went and did all that. The tenants are getting gradually more and more upset as they are starting to realize what's happening. And I guess to make it better too, so this is one of the best neighborhoods in Spokane. They were paying, I think it was $1,200 a month for this big house. Lived in the main house, which is very cheap for a house of that size. Market rent would be $1,900, $2,000. And the previous owner was paying all their utilities and their Wi-Fi and like cable, just because he was like 85 years old and didn't know any better. So they were
I never understand when we run into that. We'll run into it often with smaller multifamily, where they're like, they're showing you the financials, and it's like, oh, okay, this looks interesting. And then they're like, yeah, and then, we pay for the internet, we pay for the cable, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
If you're watching this, highly recommend you don't get in the position of paying for utilities for residents. I remember right when like the bird scooters and stuff came out, there was people that were renting low-end apartments that had electricity included, and the rent was cheaper than what they would pay in electricity for charging, 100 bird scooters there a night. Horrible situation for landlords, but also a provision you may want to add to your lease if you are in a position where you're paying for utilities. But continue, Mike.
Yeah. So they, were starting to get upset. Anyway, we put it on the market at $399, and this was when Spokane market was quite hot as well. I mean, it still is extremely, even hotter now. But I think the average time on market was like 4 or 5 days. So we crossed like the, I think, 2 to 3 week mark, 2.5 weeks, nothing, no offers. And I could not figure out why, because, it's like the best place in Spokane, and, overlooked that it was an outdated house in the best part of Spokane because all the inside hadn't been done. So anyway, nothing. And then we finally get an offer at $382,500. And, I'm pretty happy. We're due to make, I think, I forget the exact number, like maybe $20,000.
You said $382,500?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like a little bit below what we were asking, but it was going to sell. And, we were pretty happy. We're going to make something off of it. And, I was at the point where I was paying $2,800 hard money fees. I just want to be done with it, right? Anyway, this buyer goes do an inspection, and the tenants proceed to lie to the inspector about all these problems with the house. And, while the inspector's there, the buyer's also there and is talking to the tenants, and they're just making up all sorts of nonsense about like, there's like mold through all the HVAC and like all these sort of issues that are completely false. And the buyer backs out. Okay. So now we're sitting on the market still. We drop it to that 385 point, nothing. We drop it to like 360, nothing. We get another offer at like 325. And I was like, no, I'm going to lose money. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. So we take it off the market, and we're like, cool. We're just going to try and figure out how to do a cash out refi and rent it. Okay. And we're like, yeah, we'll be able to do a cash out refi at 440, which is what it's worth. And we'll be taking a huge amount of cash out. And then on an Airbnb, we're going to cash for like $1,000 a month. We were just smarter than the whole system.
Bro, how rose-colored were those glasses?
Oh man.
Can I get a pair?
even though it sucks, that I lost so much on. I mean, honestly, it was, we ended up at the very end losing like 27,000, but it was an education, and I've learned so much from the whole thing that it's like funny to look back on now. I can't believe the ignorance, right? But yeah, I mean,
you said you lost 27,000 was the total dollar amount.
Yeah, at the very end. But I mean, as we're going through the whole process of refinancing, though, I just kept doing more dumb stuff, right? Because I was like, well, if we're gonna, do Airbnb and get max ARV, right? I got to do the whole inside now. Okay, so we completely gutted the main floor, new kitchen, new flooring, right? We brought an electrician to fix all the electrical nonsense. And one of the big reasons we ended up doing that, even though it worked, was because our contractor was using a compressor to install some trim, and the walls started smoking because there was circuits with no breakers. So the house was going to burn down. So yeah, we ended up spending another $40,000 to fix it up. Overall on the inside, I think.
So now you're for what, let's call it 360.
Yeah, plus all the fees that we're still paying because I was trying to refinance while doing this construction, and the appraiser shows up and is like, I can't appraise this. It's a construction zone. So I guess our failed sale happened in July. We finally get out of the refinance in October. Okay, it was actually my birthday, October 31st.
Happy birthday, bro.
we got out of that hard money. But to make things even more tricky, we got the appraisal back, a few weeks before that. And the appraiser, I 100% certain he was still wrong, comes back and says the house is worth, I think it was 323. Okay. And the reason that happened is because he appraised it as a duplex, and in this neighborhood, there's no duplexes. So you pick the nearest duplexes, which in the location that this is in Spokane are down underneath the freeway, which are Section 8 housing. So he basically used all these $200,000 duplexes to compare to this $440,000 house. So we ended up having,
The guys asks, how long have you been investing now?
Me, I've been investing for right over 2 years. We bought our first property at the end of June 2019.
Okay.
Sorry, 2018. Sorry.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up having to leave a huge amount of money in the deal because our appraiser wasn't met. The lender that we had wouldn't let us challenge it, and we had a balloon payment due in November for the hard money. And this is, we closed on October 31st. So I was like, what? We just got to do it. Like, we'll just leave it in. It'll cash flow super well. Anyway, going through October through March, it was actually going really well.
So what did you have to leave into the deal?
We were about 130,000.
Okay.
Total. Is that about right? I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was mid hundreds though. Like, it was a significant amount of money.
That pencils from what you lost versus what your check was for. So
that's true, I guess. So it was going well. And Spokane is the kind of market where, for Airbnb, sort of short-term rental, people aren't traveling here for fun, really.
Okay.
But we have a lot of events and stuff. Especially with Gonzaga is a very successful basketball team that's right out of school. And they've been number one like the past couple of years for March Madness. And March Madness was supposed to be here this year. That one of the first rounds was. And then we have lots of concerts and Hoop Fest and like all these sort of things where people come to town for them. But it's not a place that somebody's going to flee COVID to come to Spokane, right?
Got it.
So we were booked out for all the spring, all the summer. COVID happened, and all of a sudden our bookings went to zero. And then, as we sort of started to look at it, we're just carrying this mortgage payment with no income really coming in. We started looking at different alternatives like corporate housing, things like that. And it just wasn't really doable with the house. Like, the price they were willing to pay in town didn't really make sense for us. Like, we could have cash flowed like a little bit, but I would have still been, cash flowing a couple $100 on having 130 grand in this property, right? So then as we've sort of moved forwards, and as we've started to get all this stuff going this year, working with you to get our direct mail marketing sort of set up, it didn't make sense to be getting like a 0.8% return on $130,000.
Numbers.
Yeah. So yeah, ultimately we decided to, just cut it loose and just, list it and sell it. And we started working with a new realtor who's one of the top selling realtors in town. And this was one of the other sort of red flags. I was so happy to be done with this. This guy sells properties, him and his wife, 2 to 3 days, all the time, everywhere. He walked through this house. He goes, bro, this house is awesome. Like, it looks good. It's clean. It shows well. Going to sell so fast. You know what it didn't do? It didn't sell very fast. We throw it up on the market. 3 weeks go by, no offers. We listed it at $415, trying to sell it fast at that price. Dropped it at $399, still nothing. Finally sold it for $387. The buyers also had all these weird contingencies with stuff that they wanted to have done, so I had to throw some more money into it to close it out. Then as the final twist in the knife, right after we passed the period where we were locked into the contract, my realtor got contacted by another realtor and basically said, hey, is that house still for sale? And he said, no, we have a contract. It's like, well, if you need a backup offer, here's ours, full price offer. In which case we would have actually made about $3,000 on it. So it was just, I don't know. It's one of those things that was just a cursed house by the end of it, and it was every person that I talked to that was into real estate, they were just like, I don't know, that was a great house. I don't know what went wrong. It's just a situation.
What would you say are like your top 3 takeaways on this deal? Like, looking back at the whole progression, what's the let's look at it this way. You learned 3 $10,000 lessons. What was each of them?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest one, right, is do your own due diligence. Looking in hindsight, that was the biggest one that set us up from the start to, be in big trouble with, all the, we were just trusting people that I didn't know. And I just figured, oh, they're more experienced than me. They must be telling the truth, right? Which is not true. That's a big one. I'd say the second one is when you have a house that has obsolescence, understand that that's going to be a problem when you go to sell it. So, for example, this one, it had the no ensuite bathroom, right? And this is a very high price point for Spokane. That's something that people that are buying the top price point, they want, the basics of that, right? Had low ceilings, kind of like a weird sort of closed concept. It's a 100-year-old house. That's just what I'm getting to. So lots of
a lot of the comps you were looking at was like newer, open concept, a little bit more flowy.
Little bit, yeah. So there was that, and then a lot of them were more like classic sort of Victorian houses, so they had some charm. And this one was just kind of like an ugly, sort of weird looking house, and we were banking purely on the neighborhood. So exactly, flip what sells in your market. That's perfect. That'd be the big one. And then, the last one, I'd say know what you're paying for fees, honestly, because looking back on it, right, this was actually the most shocking thing was across the purchase, the holding period, and the sale, we paid $68,000 in fees.
Wow.
Right? So that's why we lost money. And then a lot of those fees were kind of unnecessary too. Yeah. And it's just I don't know. It's a learning experience. The pluses I got out of it was, I got my first big rehab out of the way. I got my first nightmare sort of property out of the way. I met an awesome contractor who does all of our stuff now. And it was I don't know, it was expensive education in a short period of time, but it's paved the way for us to scale to, the decent little portfolio we have now.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's what I find you really figure out as an investor what you're made of when you run into these kinds of situations, right? It's, you may think you're resilient and creative, but I admire you. I think there's a lot of parts in this deal that somebody else would have been like, well, I'm done. Right. So let's go ahead and kind of just go into open Q&A. So Roger asks, how and when did you get the tenants out?
So they were on month to month, and then finally I just told them I'm not renewing it for a month, and they had to get somewhere, and it kind of turned into like a squatter situation for the first week, because they had at that point a newborn child, and they were throwing a fit. So what I actually had to do is I had to contact other landlords and was like, "Do you have somewhere these people can go?" And I found them a place, and I paid to help them move, and then they were able to get out of there.
I bet they were great tenants for the new guy you passed them to.
Actually, the funny thing is like, I don't know. I don't think they were bad people. I think they were just really upset about the situation.
Sure.
And it's funny because even like the person that they went to, he's had no problems with them, even with the COVID stuff. He's been paying, but it was just like, I don't know. Like when you go to displace people, they don't like that. It's kind of
no, and it's I do like that you point that out, because typically if we're dealing with like an eviction, we're dealing with somebody in like one of the worst positions that they've ever been in their life. So we're not going to see the best side of them. So I think, realizing and knowing up front that this is a human being we're dealing with who's not in a position they want to be in, and that there potentially may be some blowback. Yours didn't go to an eviction, which is great. But I think that's a good thing to remember, of like, a tenant that's evicted is not that eviction or who they were in that moment. Like, I wouldn't want to be judged that way. Like my worst moments, right?
Exactly.
So, I think that's super, super awesome that you did that. Roger asks also, is it possible for you to contest any of the fees you paid?
I mean, in hindsight, I'm not entirely sure. Yes,
probably could have before you paid them.
Yeah, after they were paid. No, I mean, the biggest fees on the purchase were, that was the wholesale fee, which was major. Yeah, I could have probably brought the price down, but I didn't even think about that. Well, also too, with the wholesale fee, you don't know what it is until you go to closing, right? At least I didn't. And then with like the broker fees, these guys that I used, they're kind of, I've learned since then, they're kind of known for this whole situation locally.
Interesting.
Yeah, as they, they charge 4 to 5 points. They look for like the newbie who can't work with anybody else, and that's what they do. And that's.
I mean, I understand how they explain the business model to themselves, but we're helping new real estate investors get their start. But
exactly,
it's not exactly how it works. Ruby asks, how has this changed your strategy, if at all?
Yeah, so I do. Well, I guess a big way I changed my strategy is I started trying to find my own deals, do my own marketing, as opposed to relying on wholesalers. Which I still buy from wholesalers if they're good deals, but I don't rely on that entirely. And then also too, I approach buying places with tenants a little bit differently, which we still do, but I am more explicitly open with them about what our plans are at the start. And I treat it more like I guess being a parent, as opposed to, like I'm not like unsympathetic, but I'm also, setting guidelines.
I mean, you're giving them proper expectations from day one. I mean, exactly. Anytime we buy a tenant occupied place, first off, I budget for the fact that this could become an eviction very quickly. But B, we also, hey, I understand that you're uncomfortable because you don't know me and I don't know you, and we're kind of trying to feel each other out here. But these are the rules of this new relationship. If you're on a current lease, I'm going to honor it. If you're not on a current lease, you're going to go on my lease, so you're going to probably move out, right? Or even if you don't want to go on a lease with me, you're going to go on a month-to-month lease with me. And these are the expectations. Like, this is when rent is late. This is when it's due. This is when we post a notice of eviction. This is when we file. So there's no like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're charging me a late fee. Like, no, bud, you knew up front, this is how we do things.
And that's so important too, because I found that most places that you buy with tenants, you buy them because they're having problems with tenants. You know, if they have a
Normally people don't like, let me unload my best asset. Now, I will say occasionally if it's like somebody inherited a property, they only own one, but a lot of the times it's a mom and pop investor that didn't set boundaries, who's getting worked over a little bit, who is like, I need to do something different.
Mhm.
Got another question for you here. Israel, how many deals have you done now?
So we own, I guess 17 doors technically now, because we sold that duplex. So, you know, we own a triplex, a couple of duplexes, a handful of single families. We've done 4 wholesale deals now, and I mean, I don't know, I guess 2 flips. I could say 3. I don't really count this one as a flip because we were intending to do it as an Airbnb. But yeah, so almost 20 deals, I guess, maybe.
And roughly 2 years, 2.5 years.
Yeah, almost exactly 2 years. We bought our first property on June 24th, 2018.
Awesome. I've got a question for you here. How do you fund your purchases and rehab costs now?
So we have a couple private money lenders that we work with, that we are just local connections that we've made. We have a hard money company that we work with.
Who do you work with, if you don't mind sharing?
A hard money company. They're called Inland Capital. They focus on the Washington, Oregon, Idaho sort of area.
Cool.
Kind of our go-to for that.
Markets. It's worth somebody looking into them.
Yeah, definitely. And I like them too because they're not they're not the cheapest necessarily, but they have kind of interesting terms that they let you negotiate with. For example, instead of doing a down payment, like a full down payment, what they'll do is let you essentially put a second mortgage on like a different rental property you own. So you can like technically come very little out of pocket on the purchase.
You can like leverage something else. I think the technical term there would be cross collateralizing.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, we use them, and then we actually have a good relationship with the local credit union, which is who we do all of our refis into. And I'm working with them on sort of giving us more construction sort of loans for like larger projects and stuff, but we're not quite big enough that they care about us yet. So we'll get
there. No, it's always you're building up almost like that relational credit. Like, I brought you business and it's consistent.
Exactly.
Let's see. We've got Michael. What are the most common renovations you make to your properties that have resulted in the best return?
Is he talking about like selling, like returns, or?
Yeah, I would say so. I'll kind of tackle this one, Michael. So normally we're looking for things that increase rentability. So, or our ARV. I've got a flip we're doing right now that we're documenting on YouTube that we enclosed in a loft, built in a closet to make a 4th bedroom. Dramatically increased our sales price versus the cost of framing in this little half wall and building the closet. I also personally, I want to attract good tenants that are interested in long-term leasing relationships. So for me, like, I don't really like places that are on window units. I have a few that I bought, but you wouldn't catch me dead living somewhere with a window unit, right? I'm spoiled. I want central.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Window unit?
Yeah.
That must be a Midwestern thing. It's like, it looks like a microwave, and you stick it in like a halfway open window and it blows in cold air.
Oh, okay. Oh, like a window AC unit. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. There you go. You know what they are. It's all right. I pronounced.
I thought you meant like a feature to like the house, like that was like an ADU, like a window.
No. So I'm looking for places that are on central. I'm looking for places that have 3-prong. I know a lot of landlords don't do this, but I want my places to have dishwashers and garbage disposals. I'm not going to live somewhere in 2020 that I have to hand wash and dry my dishes. That's just that's not, I'm trying to attract, I think, more of a up market tenant. So, other things like if I can have washer and dryer on site, I'm all for it. Now, I'm not necessarily providing units. And if I am providing these things, our leases state that like what's in there is in there. And if they break it, they get to pay to fix it. So, if the previous tenant left a washer and dryer, you're free to use it. If it goes out, you're free to fix it or replace it. So I think probably just more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question, Michael.
Yeah.
A couple people have asked, they said, you've mentioned the word we. Do you have a business partner?
It's funny, I always do that. So I guess when I say we, I'm predominantly talking about my wife and I. It's because we kind of invest together, even though I do most of it. And she, she pays our bills with like a steady paycheck while I grind stuff out. But we have actually partnered as of the beginning of this year with one of my buddies from school to try for our direct marketing side of our business. Cool. Just because it's a little bit easier to, juggle going to appointments and doing all that when you have somebody else to assist you with it. And you're also trying to carry a job. That's
awesome. Is he a partner in any of your rentals?
Yeah. So in 2 of our rentals,
okay.
We have a duplex and a single family. Yeah, he's a partner.
Like 14 are you and the wife, 3 are with him. So
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I do the same thing. A lot of the times, like if I'm talking about stuff, I'll use we. I just don't like to even use like I on a lot of. You just start to sound arrogant, like and then it's another 20 units. It's just like no.
Exactly.
Very, very cool. Alex asks, do we ever give any lenience towards late fees on tenants? So, Alex, with me personally, once I set those expectations, I enforce them. So, and we always use fair housing and the policies as the bad guy. So it's not me, but it's, Mr. and Mrs. Seller or Mr. and Mrs. I guess renter at this point. If I were to do that for you, I would have to do that for everybody else, or I could potentially get sued or be accused of discrimination or something of that nature. So unfortunately, our policy is rent is due on the 1st. You have a 5-day grace period, so up till the 5th at midnight to get it in. On the 6th, there is a late fee. Now, I will tell you, Alex, there was a situation with a couple leases we inherited that had a $75 late fee. And I mean, it's like a 10% late fee on these units. And we had people that were paying it every single month. And we actually made the decision as a business of like, that's not how we want to do things. Like, don't get me wrong. I make a lot of money on late fees. That's why they're there, right? It's if you have to deal with kind of the risk and the hassle, there's a financial trade-off there. But we weren't okay with a 10% premium for that. So we actually reached out to them and we're like, hey, this was kind of right before COVID hit. So it's probably January, February that we were like, you've been paying a lot of late fees. I can't move your date. So ideally try to work on getting rent in before the 5th, but I'm not going to charge you a $75 late fee. I think we dropped it down to like 40 or $50, right? So, and they were all like, oh, wow. Like they in their mind, their rent wasn't, $750, it was $825 because that's what they'd been paying. But it was like, no, like, you could pay even less if you can get it in a couple days earlier kind of a thing. And I think that just shows like we're humans, they're humans, and we're not trying to like squeeze the life out of them.
Yeah. I guess I'll say that I have one time, and we had this tenant that was living paycheck to paycheck. We inherited her, and she had a very severe health situation, and she was in the hospital for I think like 3 full weeks. And the doctor actually called us and was like, hey, we actually posted notice for these people. And basically the doctor called and explained the situation. And we're like, yeah, we'll let you get caught up. That's fine.
You're like, I'm not trying to be on the news.
Exactly. Right?
Local landlord.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. Let's see here. We had Ruby says, this is helpful. Thanks, guys. Congrats, Mike, on learning from this deal and from the more recent ones. She set a goal to close her first in Q3, so I have a lot to learn. Ruby, we're both happy to help. So as you have questions, just hit them up. We're really pretty good about responding to like 95% of things. My only request, make it specific. How do I rent or how do I become a landlord is kind of like, where do you want me to start? But, Aaron just asked, how are your late fees structured? And do you do the standard 40 across the board? Something like that. I'm happy to answer all day long. Aaron, I believe our average is actually right at like $50. And it's pretty standard. On something that's more expensive, it may go up a little bit. Like if it's a $1,600 a month place, it's probably going to be something more like 75. But I think having it be something in that like 2.5% to 5% of what the rent is pretty fair. But there's not really like a set rule on that. That's just more kind of how we've done it. But our standard baked in is $50. Some people charge more. Some people, we have a couple inherited residents that are on a lease. That's a huge pain for us on our property management side, where rent isn't due till the 15th and isn't late till the 20th. So it's like, somebody could theoretically be 45 days behind before we can even post a notice of eviction, which in Indiana is a 10-day notice to pay. So that kind of sucks. Mike, this one's for you. How have your terms, fees, and points changed with hard money lenders as you've become more experienced? Do you make a written prospectus to negotiate better terms?
So I mean, we've used like similar people. They just get better as they trust you to perform. What are you typically paying right now? So our most recent one was 10%, and it was 3 points with a deal that if we refied in less than 5 months, it got knocked down to 2 points.
To 2 points?
Mm-hmm.
So you get a point back if you get it done in 5 months?
Exactly, yeah.
That's awesome.
So, not too bad. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to, they have to get to know you. It's a business relationship. I think that's something that people don't realize about hard money lenders is it's not like going to a bank. They're not going to, just like, oh, well, this is what the rate is. This is what we can give you right now. Going to a hard money lender, it's like they're going to analyze you. They're going to analyze the deal. They're going to analyze
track record, quality of your work, your reputation. That's one thing I think it will highlight just one more time. Like, Mike could have been like, oh, well, I'm just going to walk away from this loan because, they charge like this insane rate. But Mike's reputation is worth so much more than that. People, I think, don't realize how small of a network real estate investing is. Like, everybody talks. There's like different cliques and things of that nature, right? But you start to be known as the guy or gal who like puts deals under contract and then doesn't close. It's gonna come around to bite you. Somebody asked this, Mike, this one's for you, but what was your motivation to start investing in real estate initially?
I guess the initial motivation was when we moved to Spokane. After I went to school here, went to Seattle, then moved back, and I lived in a house that my now business partner was renovating to be a student rental, and I had no handyman skill or real estate knowledge at all. And he basically sort of taught me, oh, this is what he's going to do. This is how much money he's going to make, blah, blah, blah. And then I didn't really think about it much. But then in January of 2018, I decided that I hated my career of 5 years of being an engineer, even though I was making, decent salary, and I walked. And I was like, didn't really have a plan. And then as I sort of figured stuff out over the next few months, I was like, well, real estate, you can make passive income, right? You can, go and retire early. I was big into like the FIRE thing back then, the financial independence movement. And real estate.
Anybody who doesn't know is financial independence, retire early.
Yeah, thank you. And that was something that repeatedly came up. I started, getting into bigger pockets, and I was like, cool, let's buy a property. And the first properties that I bought were terrible deals, but I'll save that for another time. But they were at the purchase, but now they cash flow me, I think, about $650 a month each.
Those are the turnkeys.
The turnkey ones, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do I've had a turnkey rant brewing, so we'll save that for a different time.
Yeah.
Hunter asks, any advice for approaching the owner of a vacant property, letter or another form of contact? So Hunter, for me, if it's like one property and you're interested in that particular deal, go to skipgenie.com and pay, I think it's like 25 cents a search to run the person's name. If you're like super, super broke, not going to hold against you either. There's a website called True People Search that actually has pretty good data on a lot of people. So I would start there. They're totally free. You may be able to find their phone number just like that. If it's more like, you've got a list of stuff built up from Driving for Dollars, or you bought a list from PropStream or something of that nature, that's more where we go like the direct mail route. I'm not a big fan of cold calling as a business model. It's just not how I've built our portfolio. Julio, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm terrible with names, so if I ever butcher your name, please don't take it personally. First off, man, I love your honesty. So 50K in cash, credit score is 615 due to irresponsibility on my part. First off, bonus points for vulnerability for throwing it out there, but also super, super impressed with your personal responsibility. A lot of people wouldn't be like, yeah, it was me, right? Like I wasn't smart. So I didn't do a post or anything on this, but my credit score for the first time in my life bumped up into the 800s last month. And I was historically like low to mid 700s, high 6s. And the reason my scores was always low was utilization. I did a couple YouTube videos with my buddy Greg Hellback, and he said he was the credit card king for starting his business. And I probably could have given him a run for his money. I was no stranger to being at like 98% utilization for a long time. So the big thing for me was getting those paid off to get my utilization down, and then also just kind of letting my accounts age. I'm a big believer if you have credit issues and hiring like a legit credit repair firm. You mentioned 18 months. They could potentially accelerate that. I don't have any affiliate deal or anything set up with these guys. I just used to work with the guy who runs them. There's a group out of St. Louis, Missouri called Show Me Credit Solutions that you can reach out to. I've sent several people their way and heard great things. So feel free to kind of do your own due diligence, but it's one of those things that could be worth investing into a bit more. On your question, you've got 50K in cash. What can you do to invest? There's a lot of stuff you can still do, man. Wholesaling is an option. Purchasing properties on seller financing with a down payment is an option. I would say having 50K liquid. I would rather have 50K liquid than how I started, which was like great credit and no money. If you Google me on Bigger Pockets, you can find my old posts of like, I'm 12 years old and broke, but have good credit. What do I do? Kind of stuff. So you have the luxury that you've got a little bit of liquidity that you can throw around to kind of kick off your career. Mike, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say honestly, if you're looking to get started right now, get networking and find a partner to do your first deal with, right? Like find somebody who doesn't have bankable. Exactly, yeah. And learn from them. One of my favorite sayings that gets sort of thrown around in this business is 50% of a good deal is better than 0% of a great deal, right? So find a deal, right? Find somebody who can get a loan and bring them in on it. If you got 50K, perfect. You can say, hey, will you get the loan? I'll fund the rehab, and we split this thing, right? And that, not very many people would say no to that if it's a valid deal.
Yeah, no, I like pie, right? So I would rather have some than none. Julio, yeah, it's Show Me Credit Solutions. I think they're based out of like St. Charles or Wentzville, Missouri or something. You can Google them and find them. But again, you may have somebody else that that's one of those industries that I would check references in, because there's a lot of people that are like credit repair experts whose own personal credit's like a 4. That's not the guy you want to spend your money with. if I'm being candid. Let's see what else we've got here. Ruby, Ryan, what's the hardest but probably the best lesson you've learned in all of your experience in real estate investing? It's a whopper of a question. What was the hardest but probably the best lesson you've learned in all your experience? So Mike and I touched on this a little bit, but I have a contractor, general contractor, that I spent over $1 million with just on construction on our properties. And he was a GC, so managed his own subs. And early on, stuff was great. Relationship was great. I mean, we'd take him out to dinner, steakhouses, annual kind of stuff. I mean, I've worked with him for about 3 years. Did flips with him. I mean, he was kind of we'd walk through a property and he'd be like, oh yeah, this needs this, and this, you're good. I mean, we didn't even really do formal inspections on a lot of stuff because his stuff was so dialed in. And I would say the last 7 months we worked with him, which probably represented about $300,000 or $400,000, his quality just plummeted. And I mean, the amount of work we have had to redo has sucked. I bought an 8 unit and he was like, he did our inspection like he normally did, went through and was like, oh, really, really solid place. One of our big concerns was the roof because it was a pretty large building. And he was like, oh no, it's solid. 3 months after we bought it, the roof actually caved in, like joists failed. Cost to redo that alone was $50,000, right? So, Mike and I have kind of touched on this, but get due diligence done, have it done by somebody who is a pro. And the other thing I would highlight is past performance doesn't guarantee anything for the future. So for me, I hung on to, even though projects were running late, even though I'd show up at a job site and stuff hadn't been done, I was holding on the fact of like, oh, he's done so much good work for us. And I should have fired him a lot sooner. And, again, it's one of those things, I view it kind of like those tenants. I have no ill, feelings towards the guy. Actually, if I, saw him right now, I would sit down at a bar with him and have a beer. Would I pay him to work on another property? Probably not, right? So trust but verify, I would say, was probably my biggest lesson. Mike, you got anything you want to add in closing here, man?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess my hardest but best lesson is less specific than yours. But like mine's more just like a general lesson that I've learned from doing this is that, your success in this business is 100% tied on how willing you are to be uncomfortable and keep working. I can't tell you how many times doing this I've wanted to quit, how many like literal sleepless nights I've had where I've had, especially in that situation with that one property where we were just writing these huge checks. Well, it was also we were also flipping another house that wasn't going great. We had all the other stuff going. And, it can be so easy to get discouraged. But the best lesson that I've learned is that when you're doing a business model like this that is so widely done and so repeatable, it's all just about getting reps in consistency and, just like pushing forward through it.
I want to highlight something you said there of you just had to get used to kind of being uncomfortable. And two of my favorite quotes that kind of go together. Jen Sincero has the quote that we never really commit to doing things. A lot of the times we just agree to try something until it gets too uncomfortable or too difficult, which is huge. I mean, not to go political or anything, but I think that's one of the huge reasons the divorce rate's so high in our country. My wife and I have had to have some brutal conversations over the years. Of like, what do you mean this isn't like, but I thought it was going to go this way, right? The other quote that I tack onto the back of that, Chris Robinson was speaking for our mastermind and used the expression of, do you have a quit date? And, basically the same thing. Do you have a limit that once I get to here, I'm done? And if you do, well, you might as well just quit now. If I'm going to figure this out one way or another, which you're going to get tested in all the time. I mean, Mike has this deal he put behind him. His problems aren't over. Like, there's going to be another deal. There's going to be another issue. There's going to be another hiccup.
Exactly.
All right, 2 more questions and then we'll wrap. Daisy asks, Ryan and Mike, do you guys reward tenants to show appreciation? Example, small gifts or nice notes. That sounds good in theory. I'm too busy, so no. I'm bad enough at telling like people close to me in my life that I appreciate them, let alone like, sending out small things. Now, I will say on our tenants applications, we ask like what their birthday is, anniversary date, as well as like favorite candy bar. And if we have like a maintenance issue where like they're inconvenienced or something like that, we will like, hey, their favorite candy is a Snickers. We may leave them a Snickers with a note of like, hey, super sorry that, you were late to work today because maintenance was running behind. Like, so we've gathered and collected that info, but we're more using that as like an olive branch when we've screwed up versus like, hey, wow, you've honored the terms you agreed to. Like, well, that's kind of the expectation, right? What about you, Mike?
No, we don't.
Okay.
I mean, like you said,
all right, cool.
They signed the lease. There's the expectation there. I mean, that's like everyone gets a blue ribbon, kind of in my mind.
That's fair. All right, no participation trophies. All right, Lawrence, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, man. Biggest concern to entry doing the first deal is not finding a cash buyer because of too little meat left on the deal and having to walk away from my promise to the seller. Any suggestions on that? I've got like 3 suggestions on that. So I've got a video on reverse wholesaling on my YouTube channel. I think it's titled like how I made $100,000 starting with 0. That walks you through a way to do that, where you're basically finding buyers first and then bouncing deals off of them to get there. I will buy it at this price point kind of a number. I literally just did that yesterday on a deal that the seller owed $17,000 above my max that I was willing to pay. And I shot it to a flipper who buys from me in this part of town all the time. And he said, yeah, I'll do X. And X had $5,000 worth of profit in it for us. Now, even if it had 0, I would have just connected the 2 and let them do the deal. Or even if it was like, one of them was going to have to give by a couple grand, I would have just connected the 2, but we made $5,000 just for kind of bridging that gap. So that would be my recommendation. Second thing is just make sure you're getting really good deals. I would say most investors, most wholesalers don't get very good deals. And then it is kind of this like, let's throw it out there and maybe it works, but probably not, right? It's if you're getting true like bird deals, 75% minus repairs, minus my minimum is $8,000 that we budget for that we want to make. Like that's a deal. Like we're getting such a good deal that if somebody else doesn't want it, well, all right, twist my arm, I'll take it down. So that's typically not the hard part of finding the buyers, but I do agree with you on the integrity piece. I don't want to be known as the guy who's running around town telling people I can buy their house for cash and then never getting anything done. One thing I'll highlight on that, be super careful if you are dealing with somebody in like severe lifestyle distress, severe financial issues. Like if you lock up a pre-foreclosure and they lose their house because you couldn't honor your word, I mean, I don't have much respect for you. If it's like a landlord on a cash flowing rental and you screw up a deal and you end up pulling out on it, like, okay, that happens. But ideally you want to take that moment and learn from it. And I mean, there's times that it happens for legit reasons. Most painful deal I ever pulled on, during our inspection, we found actual mold in the HVAC. And this was a guy that on my initial appointment found out his wife died and asked me to stay till his kids got there. So like the rapport was there. So for me to now call this guy who I'd done the whole, we're going to fix this house up, like you wanted to do, like your wife wanted to have done, to be like, hey, yeah, I can't. Like, your house is pretty well. I mean, it was like mold in the walls. It was a real bad situation. So it happens, but learn from it and try to not have it happen again.
Yeah.
I think we'll call that a wrap because we've gone an hour and 15. Mike, I really appreciate your willingness to do this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Most investors would be here for the $100,000 profit check, not the negative $27,000 check. So appreciate you hopping on. If any of you guys want to connect with Mike further, it's at MDD_investor on Instagram. And we will talk to you guys next time.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.